cared for the earth since the beginning of time. We are the stewards, the caretakers, the keepers of the land, air, and water. We are the indigenous people of the world, and we are using our traditional ways and science to protect Mother Earth. I'm Steve Sweetholt, and welcome to Down to Earth. Today on our show, we're heading to Arizona, where we'll meet a Navajo community that uses traditional methods to manage their lands. And later on the show, we'll meet Marilyn Wallace, a filmmaker from Australia who took part in the UN Climate Change Conference in Copenhagen. Every region in the world has its own unique agricultural history, and Arizona is no exception. The indigenous people from this region built complex irrigation systems and grew diverse crops despite the intense heat and low annual rainfall. Art has arrived at the Salt River Pima-Maricopa Indian community with two burning questions. Do local farmers still utilize their ancestral growing techniques? And do chili peppers really get hotter the further south you go?
You know the story of the Pima and the Maricopa, the Akamil Atam, that's the Pima, the river people, and the Alchedam Pipash, the Maricopa people. The history tells us in the early 1800s that the Pipash migrated up into this area from the Colorado River, the Yuma area, and they combined, the two tribes made agreements to work together to help each other, and they formed, an alliance against the other tribes. And so we've been together since the early 1800s. That's what the history tells us. But at one time, we were all south of here, probably about 35 miles from here, in what is now called the Gila River Indian community. But the history says that we were there, we were farmers, and we lived off the river, the Gila River that ran through there. But when settlers started coming in to the east of the Gila, of the Gila River Indian community, they dammed up the river. And so some of the tribal members moved north 30 miles here to continue to farm off the Salt River, of which we are named after here.
The ancestors of the modern-day Salt River Pima-Maricopa Indian community has developed unique farming techniques to ensure their crops would survive the intense summer heat. Growing vegetables in spiral-shaped mounds and grouping crops according to their water needs ensured that they would get the best yield and have enough food to survive the winter.
Historically, we would dry farm using rock as a mulch, and there's a rock mound over there. We used to farm with those. And the whole principle behind both of these, the rock mound and then the spiral, is that when water is applied to this land, it goes underneath the rocks, and then the rocks act as a barrier between the sun and the water, so it doesn't allow evaporation to occur. And so it retains water here a little longer, and in the desert is something that we really, are looking for. But the benefit of this spiral mound is greater, because if you were to take the spiral, if you look at the spiral as a road on a mountain, if you were to stretch that road out, this could be like a 50-foot garden or 50-foot row.
So you could grow more.
Yeah, so we can grow more in the same area, and in that same 50 feet, we can put a few of these out, and so we can maximize our yields. With these rocks being here, we can forget to water this for a month or two, and it'll sustain this area. So it's a self-sustaining system. As long as you stick with your zones, you can have a pretty diverse garden. That would be enough for a family. We got like hundreds of pounds of squash off one of these before, in one season. So,
well, it's pretty cool how it's kind of working with nature a little more.
Yeah. I'm gonna have you plant some of our autumn vihor. It's autumn vihor.
Autumn vihor.
Yeah, our Pima tan peas, Pima peas. But these guys, they can handle the salt. They can handle the extremes of the desert. They can handle the lack of nutrients in the soil a little better, because they've been adapted to this land for hundreds of years, and most of our crops for thousands of years.
Right.
And so a lot of them are indigenous to the land, like the people, and so they have a relationship with this land. Traditionally, what we do is we plant with a digging stick or a planting stick, and that's if we were planting on a like a flat surface or in a field. And you might wonder why it's so small. It's because I'm not as tall as you. But when you have this stick, you want it to reach at your hand as your hand slacked. So the way you would plant if you were planting on a flat surface, right, is that you would dig a hole, you would put it out forward so that you can rest on it and support yourself, plant your seed, put 2 in just to make sure, kick it, and move up. We always want to have good spirits about us, good thoughts, and they say if you're not into your work, then don't come out, because your plants and the land, your work will reflect that in there. And then they say these are our relatives too, so you treat them with all the respect in the world. And so when you plant, you thank them for allowing you to plant them, and hope that they come up good. And where you can do that within, and so that's what we do in our minds. We keep these thoughts alive, and we do it in a good way, so that we'll have a good harvest. Once you kind of are ready to plant, a good rule of thumb is to, like I said, just if you have a seed that's about this size, then double the size of the seed. If you really want to try the chili, I would take the whole thing all the way to the seeds and all. I'll eat one with you.
Eat the whole thing?
Yeah.
I could handle that. Any little hotter, I might be screaming here. What would you call this here?
What we call this garden is a double dug. Double dug is refers to the way that we aerated the soil. We dig a trench out, throw it to the side, and then we bust up the ground underneath that. 1 shovel's length in the ground, so about half a foot in the ground. We aerate that soil. It rises, and then we pour that.
Sorry, Jacob. This is hitting me now.
Did it get you?
It's making me tear up.
I thought you were just passionate about our garden.
Whew, it has a late kick that's pretty hot.
The way you plant a potato, you can buy seed potatoes, and basically you just cut them in half, and then again quarters. And as long as there's eyes on your cutting, you can put that in the ground, and this will turn into the root system, and it'll turn into a whole new plant.
Say a little prayer to the potato gods.
So you're going to show me how to make
if you would like to try, we can show you how to make a bed here.
All right.
And then we'll go from there. And so we already started one.
So break up the bottom layer?
Yeah. Yeah, the double dug's it's labor intensive, but in the end it pays off because you don't have to work as hard.
What are you doing with the stuff that you produce? Is it being distributed amongst community, or how is it used?
Well, the first few years that we worked here, everything we grew wasn't very much. And so what we did was we grew to create a seed bank. And the seed bank that we grew was so that we can give out food in the future. And so now we're about there. We've grown enough food or enough seed that we have a healthy seed bank. We have enough seed to grow large areas. Everything that we produce out here gets distributed to the community through the various programs of the Cultural Resource Department. So, but before we give it to the other programs, we always give it to our elders, because they're kind of our link to the past, and through them we learn a lot of stuff that we might not have known. And so we give to them first.